The fall 2025 season of Investigation with Dr. T is proudly centering on our institution's newly designated prestigious R1 Carnegie classification. We're seizing this moment to go deeper, think bigger, and highlight the game-changing work that's happening. So each episode this fall is going to spotlight cutting-edge research initiatives, groundbreaking studies, and powerful doctoral dissertations led by PhD and EDD students, research-engaged faculty, field-based research practitioners, and community partners. So we're going to focus on vital sectors like education, criminal justice, human services, while also welcoming special guests from the College of Psychology, College of Dental Medicine, and the College of Computing and Engineering. Join us as we celebrate our journey into R1 territory and explore what it truly means to lead with research, lead with scholarship, and lead with purpose. So stay tuned. Fall 2025 Investigation with Dr. T. It's going to be unforgettable. And so tonight, I am so excited because I haven't seen him in so long. It feels like 1,000 years. There was a time where I don't know how many years we've been doing this now. Feels like 5, 6, something like that.
7.5. And COVID's got started. That's when it was.
Yeah, and Ed is an amazing guest. He is the founder of UNFOUND. It's a podcast on YouTube and also Spotify, and there's other venues, right?
Sure, on iTunes and I have the website, theunfoundpodcast.com. We're doing a lot of different places. Yes.
Yeah, and so we're so excited that we were able to get him to be a part of this research season, if you will, right? Our R1 designation. And so interestingly, usually Ed does, and I also want to say that he's a journalist, he's a filmmaker, he's a podcaster, and an amazing human being who gives voice to the unfound and particularly not only them, but their families. And so that's really very, very important work that he does. He's earnest and brilliant, and the way that we're able to fit him into this season is because he has been collecting data all along. And we're going to talk about tracing the vanished, an empirical study of missing persons. So, Ed, thank you for being here. And so now we could add this to your vast bio, right? So not only a journalist, not only an actor, not only a filmmaker, not only a podcast, but a scientist, now a researcher. So it's really good to see you again.
Yeah, and if some people have gone to the YouTube or the Unfound YouTube site, a couple months ago, I even did a video on cooking chicken wings. So am I going to have to add to the title as well, Dr. T? I'm not so sure, but I make a mean chicken wing too.
Yeah, I saw that, and I found that very fascinating that you're now doing that as well. So that's pretty cool. But look, I know you have a jam-packed, content for tonight, and I don't want to take up any more time. Maybe you can say a little bit about your show, a little bit about the work, how long you've been involved in it, and then we can jump right in from that point into the slide presentation that shows all of the data and how you analyzed it. And then maybe at the end we could, because we have a lot of our PhD students tune in, and especially this season, because they're really interested in seeing how research is done and in various ways. And so at the end, we'll probably get some really good questions from our students, as well as from me and anyone else who's watching, to ask you about methodology and analysis and that kind of thing. Okay? So,
and I also want to say, if there's a question that pops up during this presentation, I will try to answer it, because this might go for a while. I don't want anybody to forget what they were going to ask. So if something pop up in the chat that is relevant to what I'm talking about right at that moment, do not be afraid to, jump in and, ask me a question or make a comment, please.
Great, excellent. So just tell us real quick about your Unfound podcast, the YouTube show, all of that. When is it? We want to say that maybe up front, and also how long have you been doing this work, and what got you interested in this work?
I will start right there. I've always been interested in disappearances going back. I'm 55 years old now. And going back to the 1970s, there was a show called In Search of with Leonard Nimoy that first made me aware as like a 7-year-old of this world out there where there are all these mysteries. And that kind of put me on the path. And then, of course, there was Cops and Unsolved Mysteries. And then eventually in the mid-90s, the internet came to Leechburg, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And one of the first things I did was I started reading about disappearances online, maybe going back 95, 96. One that comes to mind is Jody Huisentruit. And finally, what I like to say is my technology finally caught up to my interests. So podcasting came along, and I combined this interest that I'd always had with podcasting, and that's how Unfound came to be in September of 2016. So I've been doing this for over 9 years now. This is not a hobby of mine. This is not even a part-time job. This is all that I do. So what you're going to be hearing from me tonight is data that's been collected by somebody who does this as a job. No different than an engineer who builds bridges every day, or an accountant who works on, somebody's business's books every day. This is not something that was just done in my spare time. This is what I do 24/7. I hardly ever take any time off from working on disappearances, reading about disappearances, collecting information on disappearances. And so that's really, in a nutshell, how all that came together. Of course, you and I, Dr. T, we came together in about April of 2020. So we've been doing this for about 5.5 years. Of course, I've been down to Nova Southeastern University a couple times. Always enjoy myself down there. Maybe I'll make it down there again sometime soon.
Yeah. Just before we get into the actual presentation of the research, what got you interested and curious in starting to collect data and have a database? Like, tell us a little bit about the history of that, if you can.
I've always been good at stats. I did not do very well in college, but the one class that I did do well in, the only A I got in my entire college career, was in statistics. And I did a project my senior year. I was the only person to get an A on it in the entire class for a semester. And so my brain just kind of goes in that direction pretty well. And so I can't help but then bring that to disappearances. And certainly there have been studies done on disappearances. In fact, I'm reading a book from the United Kingdom on disappearances. It's just called Missing Persons right now. But there's not a lot of information out there, at least not the way I think it should be done after living with this for over 9 years. It just seems that studies and statistics that have been done over the years, in my opinion, missed the point. And so my goal was to start collecting disappearance information in a different way, using different criteria to try to see as they say in statistics, the message within all of the noise. And so that's really, of course, I did some other things in the meantime, and I did not start necessarily collecting this information as soon as I started the podcast in 2016, but right around 2019, 2020, around COVID time, is when it just kind of came to me. And it came to me, being that you're a baseball fan, Dr. T, it came to me while I was watching the movie Moneyball, which is about baseball statistics, and using those statistics that people kind of ignore to build a baseball team that can be competitive. So if you want to put this in a sports context, what I'm really doing here is the disappearance version of Moneyball. And that's the way I continue to think about it and explain it to people when I do talk about it. So that's really how it got started. So we'll just get in. We want to get into the PowerPoint right now. I see it here on the screen. So we'll just start here with just kind of giving you the basics. And trust me when I say what we're going to be going through tonight is really just disappearance statistics 101. It is an entry level course, because what I've done is, with the help of a listener, her name is Kathy, and with a good friend of mine, Cameron, I've put together a spreadsheet that is now a database that eventually is going to be made public. We're going to be able to go through all of Unfound's disappearances and click off different boxes to see what disappearances Unfound is featured will pop up. And there's 33 different criteria. So there's 33 times 33 different ways you can do searches in the database. And within that, I'm hoping as people do searches, we can start to see trends. We can start to see disappearances that don't seem to be connected, that may be connected. And I don't mean connected like caused by the same person, but let's say one disappearance is solved, the other one is unsolved. Well, how can we use information from the one that was solved to resolve the one that's still unsolved? And so this is a database, something that I've been collecting the information, like I said, with a listener, Kathy, and I'm going to get into that a little later about what all the criteria is. But starting with this first screen, the following stats are compiled over 385 disappearances that Unfound has featured over the past 9 years. They range from a disappearance that occurred in 1945, Mary Jane Van Gilder, up to 2024 with the disappearance of Anthony Reyes. They cover cases mainly in the United States, but quite a few in Canada, one in Wales, one in New Zealand, and one in the African country of Angola, where an American went missing. This is truly a random sample because of guests, because I don't go out, and the people who help me find guests, we don't go out looking for particular types of disappearances or particular types of people or anything like that. We send messages out to everybody. It's only limited by the people who respond and then choose to be on Unfound. But like I said, we don't look for particular types of disappearances. Unlike many other podcasts, I would say they're only looking for those ones that are already popular because they know they're going to get a lot of clicks and views and things, maybe like a Brian Schaefer or a Mara Murray. For me, I don't care. In fact, I take great delight in finding disappearances that aren't on NamUs, aren't on the Charlie Project, and haven't been written about at all. Those are the ones I, as a disappearance person, love to find and help those people out because they've basically been ignored. So I want to keep in mind for tonight, this is as best as you can do a random sample, I think, of disappearances, while at the same time really getting into the nitty gritty, those really fine, unique statistics of particular disappearance. So the next question is, well, isn't there already a database out there? Isn't it NamUs, this that the federal government runs? It gets a big budget. I think the budget is $10 to $15 million a year. And there's a university in Texas that manages it. And it has like 25,000 some disappearances on there. Well, why do we need another one? Isn't NamUs good enough? It's good. I'm not saying NamUs shouldn't exist. And I would urge anybody who hasn't gone there to go check it out. And certainly there are criteria there. But as it says here, NamUs focuses mainly on the physical stats. The age, the height, the weight, the eye color, what the missing person was wearing at the time. Are there tattoos? Did the person have 2 tattoos? Things like that. My opinion is, after about a few days, most of that stuff doesn't mean anything. In fact, we don't hardly talk about any of that ever on any interview that I've ever done for Unfound. Unfound, though, focuses mainly on the mental state and the history of the missing person. Addictions, mental health issues, relationships issues, education issues, job issues, friends, family, all of those things that I think over the long term mean much more in understanding of disappearance other than just how the person looks. You go to NamUs, you will not find any of that there. You can't look at the person and read the bio on any particular one person. Was this an alcoholic or not? Did this person have an opioid addiction or not? Did this person have a bipolar disorder or not? On NamUs, it's not going to tell you all of that. I'm telling you, that stuff is important. Like it says here, NamUs only gives the most general of information for the disappearance. UNFOUND's database focuses deeply on the circumstances as well as the personal side. It does both. With NamUs, doesn't tell you, except in the little description area that somebody actually has to type out. You don't know anything about the circumstances for the disappearance on NamUs either. Really, NamUs is just a list. UNFOUND's database can be used to study disappearances and the percentage chance that people will go missing, something you cannot do on NamUs, despite there being 25,000 missing people on there. And I should mention there's a lot of mistakes on there, as I've discovered. So for UNFOUND stats, we have 322 Americans. The rest are from Canada, Wales, and New Zealand. 3 Canadian citizens disappeared in the United States, coincidentally in my state of Florida. And then you had 1 American who disappeared in the country of Angola. So let's just keep in mind that this is greatly skewed toward Americans disappearing in the United States. So some of the first stats that come out, as you can see there on the screen, the average age of a missing person who has been featured on UNFOUND is 30 and a half years old. And for people who really know UNFOUND well, you're going to think of maybe a person like Paige Renkoski, who went missing back in the early 90s. Her car was found on the side of a highway. It seems that she pulled over with another motorist and seemingly got abducted. She was 31 years old at the time of her disappearance. Another more recent one, Jace Martin, who was with his girlfriend, seemingly walked off. He was also 31. We've featured the disappearance of 179 males and 205 females. Now, this is interesting because if you go to NamUs, it's the opposite. There are way more males on that list than females. Why is there that difference? I would say my perception is that just in general, families this is what I do, interview families. I would say simply that families who have females go missing seem to just take it a little bit more seriously than when males. That's nothing against any family out there. But I think if you just look at the disappearance environment as a whole, you see a lot more families with females missing getting the word out than males. Just something to keep in mind. Who's actually right, NamUs or myself, as far as what's going on in the United States, as far as the percentage between males and females, probably is somewhere in between both of our lists. So as of adults, we have 333 out of 385 that are 18 and over. Roughly half of that group is between, roughly half, 107 what were missing between 21 and 40 when they went missing. 98 are outside of that range. Males, 111 went missing between the ages of 21 and 40, 62%. 38% outside of that range. So seemingly this age range is more dangerous for men than for women. And you should know at this point, of all those disappearances, all 385 of them, 341 of them are still unresolved. The rest of them, what is that, 44? That makes up 11.4%. They have been resolved to one point or another. And yes, this is something that is listed in the database. You can search, you'll be able to search for those unfound disappearances that eventually got solved. And of course, this database is going to be continually updated as things change on the ground with any particular disappearance. We, of course, wish that number was higher, but you have to understand these are very difficult cases. And even some of those ones that are in the resolved category, they're not totally resolved. For example, Angie Arnell, her husband actually went to jail for 4 years for her disappearance, but she is still missing. We also have some situations where, like Tiffany Johnson, her boyfriend almost certainly killed her. He's in jail for a long time in Texas for kidnapping her, but she is still missing. And then we have some where remains have been found, but we don't know exactly why the person died. Maybe Tom Brown would be a good example of that, also in Texas. So moving on to reporting, and I think there was a little bit of a then there's no. This is good. This works. All right. So reporting. This is something, once again, you will not find it in the name of site, and in fact, I'm pretty sure that nobody has ever calculated this, because nobody really looks that deeply at disappearances. But when I've covered them is for 9 years and really get into the specifics of the disappearance, this first topic is something that often, not always, but often comes up. Well, how long did it take for the missing person to be reported missing? So when you see that number right there, 5.8 days, that does not mean how long it took somebody to realize somebody was missing. What this is from the time somebody realized somebody was missing until the report by the police was filled out. And we have that all in the database. This has been tracked for every disappearance on which we could do it. And so the average is 5.8 days. If you're wondering what that is in hours, that's about 140 hours. That is the average. As you would probably believe, that's a little long. And what's really maybe bothersome about that is because in our history of covering disappearances, we've had a few where, like very recently with Benjamin Ridley, nobody did a report on him missing for years. So what I did was, in making the decision to make sure none of the stats on this particular topic were skewed, any reporting that took over a year to do is not included in this calculation. So even taking the ones that are really skewed, like 10 years later, 20 years later, and yes, that does happen, it's still 5.8 days, 140 hours. And you can imagine, that's, like I said, almost 6 days. It's almost a week. That is a long time. So we shouldn't be surprised if that is the average. It's no wonder then it's so many of Unfound's disappearances are still unsolved. So you may be wondering, well, what about even longer reporting periods? And as you can see here, how about ones that took longer than 200 hours? We're getting up to 8 or 9 days. Out of 385, so that's 8.3 days, it's still 45 disappearances. So essentially anything after over 200 hours up to a year, there are 45 of those. So 45 out of 385, that's 13%. It's still a big number. It's a bad number. And especially since it's, they say the first 48, I would say the first hour is important. But if you really want to get down to why do a lot of disappearances remain unsolved for 20, 30, 40 years, that's probably where you have to start. You have to start realizing that the reporting for the average case takes a while. So we then shouldn't be surprised if it takes a while to get resolved. Maybe, never, very sadly. So going next then to reporting to the next screen here. So who is actually getting the reports? Who, like here in the United States mostly? Who is mainly responsible for disappearances in the United States once the reports are filed? You will see there that the local town city, you can see it right down there toward the bottom of the screen, over 52% of Unfound's disappearances, their reports are in the hands of local police. And what I mean by that, town city. So any police department that actually has the name of a city or town in it. So we might say, where I live, Clearwater, Florida, or LA, or Pittsburgh, but this is also small departments too. So my hometown of Leechburg, Pennsylvania. So any department that has an actual city or town in the name is what I consider to be the local police department. It's once again also in the database. You can search for just those disappearances where the reports are in local law enforcement's hands. So you can next see then that the county is 32%. So once again, here in the United States, we have counties: Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, LA County, Armstrong County in Pennsylvania, Clark County, where Las Vegas is. In the United States, 32.7, 33% are in the hands of the county police. Now, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Something you have to keep in mind when you look at disappearances in Canada. Most of the time, local police, they are not responsible for solving disappearances. Almost all the disappearances that I've covered in Canada are the responsibility of the RCMP, the Royal County Mounted Police. That is a federal agency in Canada. Of course, in the United States, maybe kind of the similar organization would be the FBI. Well, you can see right there in the stats, for the federal, so for disappearances that are at the federal level, it's only 6%. But that 6% number is greatly skewed by all the disappearances that we've featured in Canada, which I think are around 10 to 12. If I were to take all of the Canadian disappearances out of that equation and just look at American disappearances responsible for the FBI that are actually in FBI hands, it's like 1%. That's it, as far as the disappearances that Unfound is featured. Now, I realize that really goes against the grain. People thinking, well, I thought the FBI is, they always get called in and they get asked to be involved in disappearances. Greatly overstated. In fact, friend of the podcast, Julia Cowley, former FBI profiler, she even admitted to me she worked in the FBI 25 years. In all of her profiling work, she only looked at 10 to 15 disappearances in 25 years. That's it. So I think what we're saying here is the data accumulated by Unfound goes along with real-world experience, for example, for somebody in the FBI, is what I'm saying. Very interesting. So when we start thinking about education for law enforcement, how do we get law enforcement officers to understand disappearances better? It's obvious we should start at the local level because that's where most of the reports are. That's where most of the reports go. So we can go on to the next slide if you'd like. All right. Next category, relationships. This is something that I've been talking about for years, even before I looked at the stats. Relationships. Number one cause of disappearances, and this is what you're seeing here is what I mean. So of the adults featured in the Unfound's database, 126 were single. For relationships, a combination of being married or dating, doesn't matter if they're straight, gay, lesbian, it doesn't matter. It was 219 adults were in relationships. And what I've been saying is something you see right there. So single people, whoops, got tangled up here. Just a moment here. Oh, breaking the accent. I had my foot wrapped around the, sorry about that. I had my foot wrapped around the cord for the computer here. All right, what you're saying here is I've stated, if you are in a relationship, you're more likely to go missing. I keep saying this over and over. The stats show that. You're seeing it right there. Single people of the adults in the database make up 37% of Unfound's disappearances. However, in the general population, at least in the United States, they make up 46% of the general population. So if you're single, you reduce your chance of being going missing by 9 percentage points. Whereas on the other hand, if you're in a relationship, the general population, of course, it's the 54%, but people in relationships make up 63% of the adults that have been featured on Unfound. So if you are in a relationship, your chances of going missing go up by 9 percentage points. And in fact, if we really want to break that down a different way, it goes from 46 to 37. That's a reduction of like 25%. But going from 54 to 63 is what it increases your odds by about 18%. It's something that's right there. I kind of inherently knew this. Just, you do this long enough, you just kind of get a feel for this thing. But there it is, right in black and white. This is something I didn't know what the numbers were eventually going to be, but that's what they are. That's what they are. So it says there, we can go to the next slide if you'd like. Relationships continue. So to take this relationship stats further, let's just look at women. Married women, you can do that. You can go into the database, mark off adult women who are married. And you can also mark off who was the last person to see the missing person. And in here, you'll see we featured 38 women who were married at the time of their disappearances. Over half were last seen by their husbands. And you can imagine that's something that is important because there's a reason to believe that a lot of these married women who go missing, the cause of their disappearances are their husbands. However, if we look at women who are just dating, who just have boyfriends mainly, you'll see that the number is greatly reduced. You'll see that how many had their boyfriends as the last witness? Only 25, so only 33%. Why this difference? Why is it with married women it's 50% with the husbands, but only 33% with the boyfriends? Well, it may be because people who are dating less likely to live together. So whether the man has something to do with the woman's disappearance or not, who the last witness is matters quite a bit. Boyfriend, if he has nothing to do with it, he's not living with her, anything could happen to her. With some other guy, she get abducted, maybe she ran off. Whereas when you have two people who are married, they're usually living together, it greatly increases the chances that the husband will be the last witness. To me, because I'm a disappearance geek, this is something that I think is fascinating. And what it really means is all relationships are not created equal. You can't just look at a married woman or married man or a man who's dating. You just can't look at the two as the same. They are two somewhat distinct categories, even though they're both in relationships. To me, this is something that is just fascinating. Maybe other people aren't, but I think we're doing research. You're doing research this semester for your show. This is the kind of stuff that I think is fascinating. We can go into the next slide now. So that's relationships. And once again, there's a whole ton of work that needs to be done on this. There are so many things that this database can be used for. Like I said, this is just scratching the surface, barely even seeing your the fingernails on the surface of this. This is just barely getting down a millimeter into this. All right, education. For all of you, everybody, all you college students watching tonight, this should be very, very important to you. I think this, once again, fascinating. Out of the 278 eligible people, so anybody 21 and over that Unfound is featured on the podcast over the past 9 years, only 33 of them have been college graduates. That is it. Now, there are a few where we weren't sure it didn't come up, but this is a pretty solid number. 33 out of 278. That's it. That's only 11.8%. Whereas in the general population in the United States, 38% of the population has a college degree. And so what we're saying here is, if you're a college graduate, you could be reducing your chances of going missing by 27 percentage points, or reducing essentially by over 2/3 just by graduating from college. Amazing. So some of those disappearances, a very well-known one, Kyle Fleischman, college graduate, went missing in Charlotte. North Carolina, night out in the town with his friends. He went missing. Some people believe it was foul play. Some people don't. But that's an example of a college graduate who went missing in a fairly well-known disappearance here in the United States. So let's flip it around. We have 87 people who did not graduate high school at all. So these are age eligible. Of course, a 10-year-old would not be included in this, but anybody who would be age eligible. So anybody 17 and up. 87 of the people in the Unfound database did not graduate high school. That is 87 out of 362 eligible. It's 24%. Whereas the general population in the United States, only 9% of people have not graduated from high school. And so what we're saying here is, you don't graduate from high school, your chances of going missing go up by 3 times. Almost 3 times. It's crazy. So stay in school, kids. Stay in school. You don't want to go missing, stay in school. Go to college. Get your degree. And I should mention, when it comes to college, we're also talking about trade schools after high school. Those are considered college, even if they're only 2 years or something like that. Those are also included. Get your higher education, and the odds of you going missing greatly diminish. Moving on, mental health. Now, something, as it says here, we need to make clear this is not scientific. Meaning, when I say people who have mental health issues, I'm not saying they necessarily went to see a psychiatrist. We're simply going off by what the guest said, the guest's experience with that person. Did people think this missing person had a mental health issue? So a lot of this is on layman's terms. I just want to make that clear. As it says here, it does not officially have to be a doctor. And in fact, it very well may be some people, these people did see doctors and nobody knows. But for a mental health issue, so we're talking about bipolar, depression, schizophrenia, all of those kind of conditions. Of the adults, it was 85 out of 333, 25%, but the general population is about the same number, interestingly, 23%. And you can see it there. How can this be? I thought mental health would really, really overtly cause a disappearance of somebody. Not so. And in fact, this is one of those things that I was hoping to find with this database. It's really not the concern of whether the person has a mental health issue or not. The real concern is the person taking his or her medication or not? And that is something that not enough data was collected by me by doing these interviews over the last 9 years to be able to tell that. Maybe I go back and try it again. Maybe I can get a rough idea. So I think what we're saying here is, if this was more along the lines of people who had mental health issues that weren't taking the medication, this number, I think, would be much, much higher. Those two numbers would be very, very different. But being that we're just looking at mental health in general, whether the person was taking their medication or not, they're about the same, I think. Don't have any proof of that. That's just an insight I have in seeing that. Next, addiction. Once again, not officially diagnosed. They didn't have to go to rehab or ran away from rehab or avoided rehab or went to a rehab 100 times. Once again, it's just the guest's opinion. And this could be, as it says, legal or illegal. It doesn't matter whether it's an opioid addiction or a heroin addiction or cocaine. This does also include marijuana for all you marijuana fans out there. So addicted to drugs, legal or illegal, it doesn't matter depending on the state. It just doesn't matter for purposes of this database. So, and also, this doesn't necessarily mean that the drugs were the cause of the disappearance. I want to also, and that goes back to mental health. A lot of times mental health conditions do cause disappearances, but that's really not what I'm trying to say by charting this. So once again, of the adults, 126 had an addiction of some kind. And when I say addiction, I mean drugs and alcohol. We didn't get into sex addiction, gambling addiction, or any other kind of, scientifically recognized addictions. Just talking about drugs and alcohol. 126, about 1/3, and 75 of those were men. So roughly 6%. Please go to the next slide if you could. Thank you. So, but let's go to alcohol addiction. Once again, not scientific. 58 out of 342 had some sort of, were alcoholics. But interestingly, 28 were men and 30 were women. More women than men. And I'm going to have to think about that. I don't have an answer for that just yet. It very well may just be that when it comes to men drinking, it very well be in our culture, we just accept it. Well, men drink and that's what they do. And women, certainly women can drink as well. But maybe people, culturally might be less understanding of women drinking. I don't know. I'm not a drinker myself. But it very well may be, well, I saw her drinking a lot, so she's an alcoholic. Whereas you see a man drinking a lot, well, that's just what men do. Could be. Once again, this is not scientific. These are lay people looking at this particular situation. All right, next one. We got about, I guess we're going for an hour, about 20 minutes. I'll try to speed this up a little bit. What's going on? Here we go. Jobs. 79 of the adults in UNFOUND's survey did not have jobs. That's 25%. You can probably imagine, man, Ed, that sounds like a high number. You're right, because if we look at the average unemployment rate of the United States since the first disappearance that has been featured on UNFOUND in 1945, the unemployment rate over the last 80 years has been 8%, and that might even be, or 6%. That's about that. It very well could be even maybe a little lower than that. But so the general population, the unemployment rate is 6%, whereas unfound people who have been unemployed, it's 25%. So if you're unemployed, your odds of going missing go up by 19 percentage points or by 4 times. You are 4 times more likely to go missing if you don't have a job. So get your education, get a job. Don't, like I said, I know these maybe aren't surprises necessarily, but I think what it shows is that the information that has been collected over the last 9 years by UNFOUND is true. It's a good base on which to form everything else, being that these really basic ideas about people who have problems in our society, it's being shown through these statistics. So then we can start to get deeper into these numbers and these different criteria and everything, and be assured that the additional information that we're collecting is correct. Whereas on the other hand, if we were to do this and we looked at the disappearances and we were to find out that only 1% of the disappearance people had addictions or something, and we know that the average in the general population is 25%, we would know something was wrong with the data collected. But being that everything came out the way it did, I really think that we are on a solid base, like building a pyramid or building any kind of building on which to progress further. So now we get to the conclusions. Like I was just saying, not a ton of surprises. Maybe some of the numbers and some of these are drastic differences, maybe more than I could have predicted. But still, I think everything is pretty much in line. So not a lot of surprises, but that's a good thing. It shows the premise of the database is correct. It shows the database is random, as I first stated when we first started doing this. I don't want anybody to get the idea that I just started picking out disappearances that only I want to cover. These are random, and the final stats, these first final stats being collected, show that. In addition, the special sauce is when you start mixing different criteria together. For example, does being married counter having a mental illness? As far as the disappearance stats, comparing it to the general population. Example, what department has the best resolution percentage, and how did that happen? So we look at the local reports, we look at the sheriff's reports, we look at the state reports. Which one of those has the highest percentage chance of resolving the disappearances that have been resolved so far? That might be interesting. And like I said, there are infinite combinations. There are 33 different criteria in this, and these are criteria that you will not find anywhere else. For example, as I've already mentioned, we actually have a category where you can check off, well, who was the last person to see that missing person? Was an acquaintance, roommate, whoever it was, you can check that off and only look at those disappearances that had a roommate as the last witness. So there you go. That's what I've been working on. I want, before we can get to questions and everything, I want to state I need to thank a listener. Her name is Kathy. Spectacular work. I can't even tell you. She did like 2/3 of this list. So like 220 of the episodes, having to go back through them, collect the information, and then I did the final roughly 1/3. She did a spectacular job. I can't even begin to explain it, how good it is. And then I did the other 1/3. And then I also need to thank a very, very good friend of mine for about 12 years. He's a young man. He's like 20 years younger than I am. He's way more conscientious than I was at that age. But he's the one that's actually used the Excel spreadsheet that I put it together and created this database that is eventually, it's going to be public here very, very soon. We still got to tweak a couple things as far as using it. But I need to give a shout out to those two people. Without them, this is not possible.
Any concluding besides the thank yous to anyone? Anything else? Like if you had to summarize, like, your surprises overall or highlights.
That's it. I think for now, that's everything I think that I was prepared to say tonight. Now, you should know for tomorrow's episode of the podcast, I get into even more detail, and that's why the podcast is a lot longer than the time we have tonight. I actually go through some disappearances as examples. Kind of did that a little bit, but tomorrow for the episode that's coming out, it's about an hour and a half long. I get into more of why it was created, how it was created, and then give some examples when I'm going through the different categories, more examples of unfound disappearances that fall into those particular categories.
Okay.
I mean, and I got to thank the listeners too, because I've been talking about this forever, and they have to be thinking, well, when's the thing going to be done? You keep talking about it. When's it going to be done?
Mm-hmm.
You've been talking about this for like 2 years. Come on, Ed. Come on, Ed. It's done. I just have to make it public.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. I want to put a little bit of another spin on this because you've mentioned NamUs, and I don't know if our doctoral students who are watching were aware of this. I mean, this might not be in their area of interest to look at missing persons data, but if they are, I've put this up on the screen here. I hope that everyone can see it. Are you seeing the NamUs case findings?
Yeah. Yes.
Has anyone seen that? Okay. So here's some highlights from the NamUs, and then I'm going to give some tips and tricks for using the NamUs database for our doctoral students. So let me just, this is sort of my plug, and then we'll go to the questions. So there's 25,000 unresolved missing person cases currently listed nationwide. It's important to know that only 16 states, though, mandate law enforcement reporting to NamUs. Others are voluntary. But it's a very, very large amount of cases that they actually do have in the system. So there's 15,000 unidentified. That's misspelled, sorry. 1,400 new missing persons cases. Top states for active cases are California, Texas, Florida, Alaska, and Arizona. Are you surprised by that particular?
The first three, because those are the three most populated states. Alaska, a little bit, being that it's not as populated, but you do have a lot more people with what we might call social issues in Alaska than you do compared to a lot of the other states. And Alaska's population does greatly skew male compared to the other 49 states. So, yeah.
And well, speaking of that, there's 74, in NamUs, there's 74% male missing cases. Average age is 23. Yours was 35.
30, about 31.
31. Okay. Unidentified remains, 54% white, 29% black, 15% Hispanic. How does that match yours?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but we break it down into more categories than that.
Okay.
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay. Key gap, inconsistent participation, incomplete demographic and geographic fields. So let me go to something else now. I'm going to stop this. Just tips and tricks in case any of our students are actually interested. If this is like, wow, secondary analysis. We love when a student is interested in secondary analysis because it's an easy IRB, right, for them. And it's sort of easy. You don't have a recruitment strategy. If it's public data, public information, it's easy to access. So some tips and tricks for using the NamUs database, if you're interested, would be to start with the research question, right? And some of these research questions might be like, what are the demographics, or what are the average ages, for example? That's more descriptive statistics, right, than the correlational analysis that we might do, which is looking at relationships between these variables. You mentioned that like towards the end of your presentation when you were saying, well, what if, like the variable mental health issue, and then married issue, like are these two things connected in any way, related in any way? Does one predict the other, like that? So if for our doctoral students and anyone who's interested in research in this way, they might want to start with a research question that was soft, like descriptive, and then go into maybe relationships or associations, correlation or prediction, right? Never cause effect. We're not going to be doing that mostly in social science research, because that really requires some of the controls and experimental design, et cetera, right? So number 2, use public de-identified data, utilize only publicly available de-identified data under the IRB exemption, explore analytical opportunities, as I just now said, look at maybe spatial statistics, geographics, anything like that you might be interested in. Make sure that you're integrating policy and ethics. You have to learn about data cleaning, because it's not just like, okay, data dump. I bet that the person that worked on this for you, had to do some cleaning of your data, right?
I guess I'm not sure I know exactly what cleaning necessarily means.
Okay.
But what I would say is sometimes things aren't, we're looking for a particular in something, and it's not quite clear.
Yeah. I have another question I want to ask you, and that has to do with how do you pick your cases? So you mentioned is a total of how many cases?
For this database, 385.
385. So of these, all of these cases were selected by, you said the guest choose the case, or you choose the case?
We look up disappearances just in general. We're sending messages out to a lot of people.
Right.
And the people who end up are the ones who agree to be on, so they select themselves. I can't make people be on the podcast.
Right. But selecting the guest is different than selecting the case, right? What's the methodology behind selecting the case?
Guests, what we're doing is we're looking at old articles and finding out who has been most represented in that family. It very well may be a mother, it may be a brother, a sister, and we can look at old articles to find out, well, over the years, who has been the most vocal person in that family.
That's how you select the guest.
Yes.
Not how you select the case.
It's just going down a list.
Right, but I just wanted to clarify that how we select the case, like for our shows, right, in the past, you'll say to me, what do you want to do? Which case do you want to do? And then I'll say something like, well, give me like a choice of 3.
Yes.
And give me a description, right? So how do you select your cases for your podcasts?
Well, I just try to find unsolved disappearances and email people.
Good. Okay. So I just want, for our students that are watching this, because it's the sheet of music that we're all playing to right now is like research methods and design. So I want to make sure that my research methods class that's watching, that they understand that this is not necessarily a random sample. It's not a random sample for our purposes in terms of research methods.
It's the random in the sense that I don't care who ends up being I don't care what disappearance. I talk to everybody.
Yes, but for like statistical research methods purposes, this is probably more of what we would call a purposive sample, not random. Random is like, okay, go to NamUs, get the 25,000 cases and randomly select 500 or 1,000, and then it's also, we also are like, kind of like, the guardrails for us around sampling is in direct proportion to confidence interval, in direct proportion to the general population, like, of that particular topic. So it would be like, of all the missing persons cases, what's that number? And then you come up with like, all right, I only want to be sort of 5% off if I can. So with 95% confidence, we're not just like making a big mistake. So like that, in just layman's terms, is how we would kind of like look at the number that we would want in our sample. And there's calculations, and you can go on Google and you could just put in sampling calculation or sample calculation, and it'll give you the formula for it. So like, that's, I think, the difference between not anecdotal. This is like anecdotal maybe on steroids, but it's the difference between that and the sort of research that we require of our students.
Regarding that is, being that I'm reading this missing persons book right now from the UK, and it was written by a professor over there, and you won't find this kind of book there. The studies that they talk about in there, I'm guessing, are random. The issue is that when they talk about these studies, they're just not very in-depth. I think when you start doing that, you actually have to talk to people who actually knew the missing people to really get a good understanding of a disappearance. So you can do it randomly, like use a random number calculator or something online or something, but still, you would still have to track down people who want to talk to you about that disappearance, because there's certain information that you're not going to be able to get. And so then the randomness goes down, because, well, then that's not random, even when you're doing it that way, because then it depends, do the people want to talk to you or not?
Right. I hope that we have time to get to our students, and I think that we maybe kind of like mixing terms. So when you're talking about your podcast, you're talking about, you're willing to take anybody who's willing to speak about it. Okay. Yeah. But when we talk about a researcher is not a podcaster. So that's different, right? It's just a different scientific method that we're like forced into. So, and the reason we're forced into that and those guardrails is so that our findings we're not jumping to conclusions that aren't founded in the data, basically. Right. So we don't want to make these generalizations.
If you were using NamUs, which is, once again, if people are reporting as much as they should be reporting, then yes, you have a list. The issue is that the data that is currently collected, even on something like NamUs, is not enough to me to make it draw any conclusions on disappearances, because not enough data is collected. So you have to, doing it randomly, you'd have to start going back to the beginning and start really, really getting deeper into the missing people and the circumstances and all those things to understand it. And of course, nobody's doing that.
Right. I really want to give it's, I'm trying to really keep the episode to like 1 hour if I can, because people's, attention spans and whatnot. But there are some really good questions here. I just want to quickly see if we could go through them. So Rachel Yates, one of my PhD students, asks these two really great questions. First, how might your findings inform policy change? Which I love this question, because this is the so what that I'm always talking about. It's like, big deal. We're curious about stuff. So what? How does it inform policy change or help practice for law enforcement agencies dealing with missing persons?
Yes. Yes. As far as policy, do you mean actually police policy, or do you mean like legal policy, like politician policy? First of all,
however you want to answer it.
far as policy goes for police, I think that what this can do is, and I have a vision somewhere in the future where police show up and they just have an app and they go through the app and you start marking off things. They start asking the right questions and they can mark off all these certain things. And through AI or whatever else, it can come to a percentage chance that's how this disappearance is going to get solved and what most likely happened.
Okay.
That's where I think this eventually can go as far as policy.
Excellent.
But for the short term, I think what this can do is narrow when instead of treating every disappearance as the same, you start collecting the information as a police officer, and you know it when you hear it. When people start using certain words about that person or the circumstances, you can already start in your mind thinking, this is that type of disappearance. And so our investigation most likely should go in this direction. Whereas that's not what I see now.
Good. Okay. I'm gonna jump to Brittany. Brittany says, in your research on missing persons, what patterns or systematic factors, themes, if you will, did you find most influential in determining which cases receive sustained attention or resolution? And how can policy, she's also asking about policy, address these disparities? So again, what are the systemic factors or patterns that you're noticing?
All right. I would say when it comes to the disappearances that are really, really well known compared to the ones that I run across sometimes that have never been heard by anybody, it really just has to do with the people around the missing person. You know, how much are they willing to push? How many hurdles are they willing to jump for a disappearance to stay in the public sphere and stay, for example, although it's a disappearance that I've not featured, Jennifer Kessie, they took the Orlando Police Department to court. That's how I support that, but that's one way you keep a disappearance in the public eye.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. This is Josefina Garcia. What evidence-based preventive strategies can be employed to mitigate the incidence of missing persons among vulnerable populations? And Josh Blotzer, also another student of mine, asked a question about being a member of the indigenous community. Well, he's actually asking the question about what agency would be responsible, and I think it depends again on where he or she goes missing. Is kind of the answer to Josh, I think.
Josh, right about indigenous peoples, both in the United States and Canada. Just within the last 2 months, I covered a disappearance of Leo Wagner. You should go listen to that episode. He was a Native American. He went missing here in the United States not too long ago, and his brother was the guest, and his brother talks about living on a reservation and everything that goes on there and the problems they run into with Bureau of Indian Affairs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Look for that episode. It's as good as you're ever going to hear about somebody talking about disappearances of indigenous peoples. It was Leo Wagner is still missing. You can look that one up.
And so Josefina's question about evidence-based preventive strategies, especially for the vulnerable populations. What do you think about that?
What I would say for women who go missing, just an example, women who go missing who are in heterosexual relationships, what I hear in the interviews that I've done, one of the big mistakes they make is they announce that they're leaving. They say, you know, Kelly Rothwell, right, a disappearance right here in Pinellas County. She went home to tell her boyfriend that she was breaking up with him. And although she's still missing, it is believed that he killed her because of that. If you are in an abusive relationship as a woman, I would say don't announce it. I would urge you, once again, I'm not a marriage counselor. But what I hear is a lot of women going missing after they're announcing and telling the men in their lives that they're going to leave.
Well, I mean, in terms of domestic violence, the incidence and prevalence of DV, we know that women or the survivor, the victim, is at risk the most 2 times. Once is when they're pregnant, and the other, and that's for females, obviously, and the other is when they're leaving. So. Yeah.
Yes.
So look, Ed, hey, we're out of time. Thank you so much. This was really interesting and fascinating, and I do want to make sure that folks know about your podcast. Can you tell us one more time? Shameless plug, and then I'm going
Yes.
to do my shameless plugs.
I'm gonna plug something I'm gonna be doing in 25 minutes. I'm gonna be appearing on another YouTube channel to do true crime trivia. Just look up D's True Crime Channel on YouTube. Just do a search. It's gonna be live in about 25 minutes if you want to see me doing something a little different.
Oh, cool, good,
Podcast comes out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, as I stated earlier. I'm gonna go through this tomorrow in even more depth.
excellent.
An episode, it's about an hour and a half long.
Excellent, great. And we want to encourage folks that is subscribed to our channel to also subscribe to Ed's channel. Ed, thank you so much. We'll talk soon. And I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate the work that you've done. And thank you to all your followers and everyone who also kind of supports us as well and our collaboration. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And more will be revealed. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Thanks
Good
for
night.
having me.
So I got to do my shameless plug now. We have a couple of more episodes that are going to finish out our season about research, because we're an R1 designated institution. It's extremely prestigious designation, and we wanted to make sure we're highlighting all the research that's being done, whether it be our alum, whether it be our faculty, or partners. So let me tell you about the last two for the season, and that's it. And next week, Silent Wounds, an empirical study of PTSD among veterans. And it's going to be Dr. Dana Mills and also Matt Chenwith from the Veteran Affairs downstairs in DeSantis, the Veteran Resource Center. And then November 20th, use of sociodrama activity to address the oral health treatment of children with special health care needs. And that's with our own Dr. Maria Levy-Minzy and Dr. Christina Godoy from the College of Dental Medicine. And I'm really excited to hear about their research, because they've been collecting data from all of the programs that we've been doing. I do this sociodrama it's autism spectrum disorder, pediatric patients, and teach the dental students this. We've been doing it now, I want to say 5 years in a row, and there's a lot of data that's been collected. So Dr. Minzy is going to talk about that, and Dr. Godoy is going to share her insight as well. So I really hope that we end with a bang the next two. And I also want to say thank you to our dean, Dr. Durham, of course, Dr. Castro, who's always supporting everything that we do. And we'll see you soon. And thank you, Eddie. Eddie Hammonds, behind the scenes, my right hand. Thank you. Good night.